Peace, peace, peace. I am Phillip Roundtree, and you are tuned into the March 17th edition of Rhetorically Speaking. Props to those of you who are tuned in. Well, dang, I guess we ain't got no IG Live people today, man, because we couldn't get the sound right. But shout out to y'all. Y'all should be over here anyway. Props to those of you who are tuned in on Facebook Live. Definitely appreciate you. But a special shouts to those who are on YouTube. Make sure you hit that share button so we could try to beat up the algorithms a little bit. All four of y'all who are watching on there, definitely appreciate you. Again, the goal is to monetize in the year 2063. I might not be able to get the bread from it, but maybe my baby or my baby's baby may be able to get that dough. So listen, I wanted to first start off by briefly speaking about the events that took place in Atlanta yesterday, where a white terrorist who apparently has a sex addiction, who apparently was having a bad day, he he went and killed 8 Asian people at various masseuse parlors in Atlanta, Georgia, and I can't say that I'm surprised. I think I speak for my guests as well, Crystal Woodley and Nafis Ricks, in saying that our hearts definitely go out to not only the families of those who were murdered by this white terrorist, but also our heart goes out to Asians and Asian Americans everywhere who are experiencing discomfort as a result of that terrorist act that took place. It shouldn't be happening. The excuses that are being given to this white man by saying that he had a sex addiction and he was trying to minimize that by killing these individuals, and then by just saying he had a bad day. It reminds me of what they said last week about the racist commentator who called the, I believe it was black women basketball players for a high school, no less. He called them effing niggers for kneeling, and he said that, well, his beatus was acting up. Now I know I watched Soul Food and they cut Big Mama leg off when she had diabetes. I didn't know it make you call folk niggas, right? So now we know that diabetes can make you a racist, and having a bad day can make you go out and murder 8 people in cold blood. But not to make light of it, but just our heart goes out because us being individuals who identify as black folk, we recognize wholeheartedly the experience that an entire community is feeling. And so with that said, we're gonna get into this conversation on Last Chance U. So if you're not familiar with Last Chance U, it is a Netflix series. It's the fifth season of it. This year is the first time they're following basketball players, a basketball team in particular, East Los Angeles College. Is a junior college, and we're following the stories of different basketball players, some who've experienced trauma, many of them who've experienced trauma. They didn't necessarily have the grades to go to a Division 1 school, and so we're following their journey as they attempt to reach their hoop dreams. And so even though y'all know the story, I averaged 27 points a game in for the Bloomsburg Husky intramural team, right? But I didn't feel necessarily that I was, and y'all laughing. Y'all, I told Crystal already, check rock. You know what I mean? I tell Nafisa the same thing. Once his Achilles get healed, to check rock as well. It could be y'all two versus me. But we know I averaged 27 points a game. But I felt like I wanted to get individuals who have their own unique story of dealing with trauma and dealing with adversity and dealing with resilience when it comes to basketball to come on and have this conversation, not only about Last Chance U, but also about their story, and because it's inspiring, right? It's inspiring, and again, I'm not qualified to have this conversation. And so with that being said, I want to welcome Crystal Woodley and Nafis Ricks to the show. Props to you both for taking time to join me today.
No problem at all. Glad to be here.
Thank you for
Word.
having us.
Word, no doubt, no doubt. Well, I'm gonna start with you, Crystal, since I challenged you to check rock. I'll be watching the videos. I noticed that if you haven't seen her, you know what I mean, the abs on Splack Cow, you know what I mean, abs on Splack Cow. She be you know what I mean, crossing people up, shadows up in her Instagram. But just tell a little bit about your story and just who you are.
So like you said, my name is Crystal Woodley. Um, my story is, I think, much like those athletes in in the show. Like, I literally can see my face on a lot of their heads. Like, literally, there's something in each individual in that series that I went through. And so for me, high school basketball player. I moved to Virginia from New York, was playing basketball at the middle school level. And it was one of them things where the coaches at the time had not seen a female player, like dribbling a ball like that. And it was like this thing of like, why is she so fancy? Stop being so fancy, So it was that constant, oh, she's an aggressor. She plays like a guy, this, and that. And that kind of led to like local high school coaches showing up to my games, talking to my mom about, oh, you're going to move here. Can you move here and you play here? And so, I ended up going to Oscar Smith High School, where I played 4 years of varsity, definitely a winning program within our district. Unfortunately, we always, like the coach at East LA experience, you got a winning program, but you don't, once you get to that regional and that state level, you can't just seem to get over the hump. But like many other young players who don't really have like that circle of influence and people who have the knowledge of like the NCAA and all these things like that, I got caught up into the hype of, oh, you're a good basketball player, and that's all that you need to do. Play basketball. Nobody was asking me, well, what you want to do when you grow up? Well, what do you want to do if you hurt yourself? What if you tear your ACL? It wasn't those types of things. And the story that I tell people all the time is that I didn't even take my SATs in high school. That's how wrapped up in basketball the environment was. Like, there was nobody saying, did you take your SATs? Let me help you to make sure that you prep. It was like, you win in basketball games, that's it. You get in trouble in class, the teacher is sending you to your basketball coach, who happens to be a guidance counselor. Nobody's telling your mom on you that you're not doing your work, and nobody tells you the adverse impacts of that when you become a senior and colleges are, recruiting you. So because I didn't take my SAT, I was recruited by, one of the schools I was recruited by was ODU, and they gave me the opportunity to either redshirt or go to this JUCO where they sent their international players, a very good JUCO, might I add. I ended up going there, doing some great things, tore my ACL 11 games in. And I promise you, I promise you, my coach's phone and my emails used to ring off the hook with, all these top Division I programs when I was at the JUCO. The day afterwards, it was like somebody flipped the light switch on me, and I was in the dark ever since then. Like, no more calls, nothing. Like, it was almost like you just dropped me off in the middle of Florida and said, fend for yourself. That's exactly what it was like for me. And during that time of recovery, my brother was murdered. And so my brother was murdered, and my mom was stationed in Japan. So I don't know when you talk about trauma, and a 19-year-old female who ain't never been away from her mom is now a whole continent away from her mom, and a brother passes away, and then you've taken the one thing from me that I have always come to lean on, which was basketball.
Yeah.
And literally, there was no support. There was no support from like my school or anything like that, So I did what most inner city kids, and I say inner city loosely because I actually grew up in a pretty decent neighborhood, but I hung in the inner city, and those were the people that I gravitated to, because even with the bum knee, those were the people that were still like, you still the best player to me. You still the best girl I ever seen play. You still this, you still that. And, it became an ego thing for me because I had nothing else. Literally, I promise you, I had nothing else. Like, I had to drop out of school because, if you want a red shirt, you can't stay in school. You gotta stop all your classes. And this was back in the day, so I don't know what it's like now. But, had to stop playing and no support. What else am I going to do but start getting in trouble? So I started hanging with people who was getting arrested. Therefore, I was getting arrested. And so just, it's a very long story from there. But, you know, I end up coming back to Norfolk, Virginia after my brother passed away. And Coach Sweat, I love him so much, from Norfolk State. I ran into him up at the school one day and he said, "You are still one of the best players, even with a bad knee. Come play for me." And he gave me the opportunity to return to school and finish playing. But in order for me to catch up to be at the junior level, I had to take like full credit hours. I ended up taking like 19 credit hours at Norfolk State and 12 credit hours at Tidewater Community College at the same time.
Wow.
Just to be able to catch up and play. I made all A's. That was the hardest I ever worked in my life. And I had a 32-hour job per week working at the rec center. And when I did all of that, the athletic director at the JUCO that I was at refused to sign my paper to allow me my redshirt year back, and I couldn't play. So I did all that hard work and got nothing out of it. But what I did learn was I mastered the anatomy of the knee while I was at Norfolk State. I trained myself with the trainer over there, and that's how I ended up getting my first basketball contract to play in Germany.
Word. Man,
and that's my story.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm sitting there. You know, you're gonna have to put that in books, you know, in a book form, or
I
you know,
hear
what I mean,
that a lot.
a made for TV movie or something. You know what I mean? Like, as
That's
long as
just
you got me in
look,
there.
I just gave you the cliff notes. Those are the cliff notes. Like, there, you know, things happen. Like you know, you got the valley highs and the valley lows in between. But those are like literally just the cliff notes. You know, there's people that have, you know, impacted me along the way, that made sure that I was good and made sure that they stayed in my head when my confidence was very low in my game because of my knee. And that's how I discovered the knee injury is a brain injury. So, you know, people that supported me along the way, that kept me on that path, you know, when I came back from Germany, those are the people that I came right back to support. And that's how I got into health and human services, ended up working for Fairfax County. So now I do what I do for young people, what I needed done for me.
Yeah.
And then in case for those who are following me now, you know, they see I do the intern strength coach at Howard University now too. So I'm back around the sport, you know, thankfully. So just trying to give back however I can.
Word. And I think that's the beauty of you know, films like Last Chance U, right? Because it gives us glimpse into these athletes' lives. I know, like, Joe Hampton became like my favorite player like overnight, because I understood the tenacity and just the mindset that he had based off his experiences. And we'll talk about characters and our thoughts on the show. But I think, you know, in hearing their stories and listening to you talk about your story in the short 5 minutes, right? We recognize that that's not even all encompassing. That's just a glimpse into the world of trauma and resilience that so many of us as Black folk experience. And so I know, Nafis, we've had you on previously, and we know a little bit about your story. But for those who are tuning in for the first time, just give us a little bit about your background.
Well, thanks for having me, Phil.
No doubt.
My name's Nafis Fritz. I'm from West Philadelphia originally, partially raised in North Carolina, but my story is very, very similar to Last Chance U. I'm talking about it's almost exact to the T. And the reason why I say that, because I can remember my journey with basketball started from Philadelphia to go to North Carolina, but my brother was murdered when I was in the 8th grade, and he was 19. I was 14, he was 19. I was in the 8th grade. So 2 years later after that, I decided to move back. Me and my little brother decided to move back with my mother. Following that, I wasn't eligible to play basketball. I played every sport, probably played like 5 different sports. When I got back to Philly, it was either you playing basketball or you can really go into the block. Me, I had classes from North Carolina that transferred over, but I was overqualified. Like, I had classes that didn't even make sense to the Philadelphia school system. So they were just trying to plug it in anywhere, but I slacked off. So I had enough credits to actually be in 11th grade. I chose to stay in 10th grade. I was feeling myself and, you know, just trying to get familiar with how Philadelphia ran. as I started to begin my journey, going through 11th grade, I played on the team, averaged like 13. High school, my senior year, I led the whole state in scoring. So I averaged 35 points a game my senior year in Philadelphia, in the state. But I didn't take the SAT to the last month before graduation. So I didn't know nothing about it. One of these guys came to the school, was like, are you qualified? And that was like a foreign language to me. So I kind of was like, I ain't thinking about books. I'm just thinking about getting a scholarship. My family can't afford for me to go to college. I'm gonna use my athletic ability to get to where I'm trying to go. So I wasn't qualified. I graduated, and it was either prep school or JUCO. I went to prep school for a half a year. Did not work. Wasn't a good fit. The coach came to see me play. It was rough. I was in Maine Central Institute, MCI. Wasn't a good situation. I came home. I started working at UPS, one of the hardest jobs I have ever worked in my life. So I'm working from 11 to 2 in the morning. Anybody who know about UPS at the graveyard shift, that's some of the hardest work you will ever do. And for them 3-4 hours, you're going to get work. So following that, the one thing that the last chance you showed me was the trauma that I was dealing with as I'm going through my process and trying to figure out what I'm going to do. I'm still got the pressure of people like, what are you doing home? You just led the state in scoring and you home. You don't got no scholarship. And as an ego and all your peers around, you like, yo, he going here, he going here, he going, where you at? So I'm playing in all the rec leagues, like, oh, you getting buckets, but I'm still not in school. I'm not at Division I level. My brother was one of my biggest critics. My little brother was one of my, you working at UPS, you ain't playing basketball. He cursing at me, and that's kind of like motivating, but I'm angry in the inside, but I didn't know how to articulate it because I feel bad about myself.
Word.
As I got to the summer, I probably had 20 offers to go to junior college. I picked one school, and as soon as I took the visit, one of the guys named Todd McCoy. So I played with him in high school, but he went to Indiana State out of the school that I went to out in Kansas. So I'm like, if I could play with him, I think I go at least mid-major and play Division I basketball. So I signed on the dot. I'm in Kansas. I've never been to Kansas a day in my life, predominantly white school. And I'm like, I just got to take a chance on myself. So when I think about Last Chance U, going to junior college and having the prep school, I get there and it's like a culture shock because I've never been around being the only Black kid in classes. Like that was hard for me at first. Like sometimes I felt like I was right. I didn't want to raise my hand about it because I was scared that I was going to get judged. So I fast forwarded. I go to junior college my freshman year. I'm the best player. Freshman of the year, I won freshman of the year. I get all these accolades, but I was a horrible leader. And the reason why I say that because I was carrying all that baggage from home of trying to be the savior and trying to make Division I. That I was cursing people out. I was like, give me the effing ball. I'll score the ball, whatnot. It wasn't until I realized at the end of the year that I had a conversation with one of my teammates named Kyle Speed and my coach. And he pulled me in the office like, yo, you got to become a better leader. Like you don't got to curse everybody out to get them to do what you want them to do. So as I say that, my sophomore year, as I get to my sophomore year, all I kept thinking, I got to win a national championship and I got to go to Division I. Mind you, my cousin got murdered. Now I'm losing it. I'm losing my mind. We grew up together, same house and everything. So that kind of flipped me out. And I didn't really know how to focus, but I was the leader of the team. So I had to kind of be even killed. As I look at Last Chance U, when you say Joe, I actually know a lot of people who had Joe on his AAU team. So I think about that time of being a junior college when you got to pay your money on your Pell Grant is literally either going home or to your apartment. And I struggled with learning how to be a man. JUCO made me grow up as a man. So when I look at them episodes, it really brings me back. Like my team could have really had a Last Chance U because we had a lot of moments where when Joe was expressing himself and the coach was letting him do what he do because that's who he knew how his personality was. I just can think about a couple players on my team that had that same kind of mindset, but they was battling a lot of things along with myself. So that's a little bit about me.
Word. And so yeah, we see wow in the comments, and that comes from the both of you. Just because, again, I know a little bit about you, Nafis, Crystal. When I challenged you to the one-on-one, right? I was like, wait, let me go look up what's going on with her, right? And I was able to see just a little bit about your story just from Googling. I think my first encounter with you was on something Nafis invited me to. You're the reason why I started watching Last Chance U, just because I saw what was taking place the previous seasons with the football players. And although I thought it was a great series, I try to not not use my time for recreational trauma, right? I like my entertainment to be trauma free. And so that's why I asked you. I feel like, yo, do you think it's worthy of a conversation? And you was like, yeah. And so, I sat and I watched it, and I saw so much taking place amongst the young men there, the doubt, the trauma that they experience, right? So we got Deshaun, whose mom died of cancer. You have Joe Hampton, who he was supposed to be the next best thing, right? He gets to Penn State, he gains 300 pounds, he gets hurt, and now he and probably dealing with trauma already. You have Malik Muhammad, who his father wasn't in his life throughout his entire life, and now he's present. And I have thoughts about that, right? When it comes to him being present now that he has this opportunity to take his talents to Division 1 and then potentially overseas or to the NBA. And you just sit and you think about your own journey in the midst of this, and that's where we're going to first talk about. First, I just want to get your thoughts on the series as a whole. Like I said, I finished up the day, and I felt like Joe did. It's just like Joe Hampton. He said, "Man, it's like it's like I'm starting all over again, right?" Because the season was cut short due to COVID. So they were in the playoffs. I believe, they were in the final eight, the Elite Eight, and they were going on their way to play for a championship. COVID happens, and we know that because we've all been affected by that too. And so I left unfulfilled. Like, dang, I'm ready to get this chip too. You know what I mean? And see what happens. So, just what were your thoughts overall on the series? And we can start with you,
I mean,
Nafis.
go ahead, Nafis.
Overall, I think it was great. I think it was exactly to the T what junior college guys and women go through. I think the stigma based on what junior college is, it's really like you're growing up, like you're getting a second chance, to be honest. And with that show, it was raw and authentic, from the cursing, from being realistic about the system, about the funding and everything. It's like, for me, it resonated with me so much because I was in that position. And I'm, like I said, I did both routes. I went prep school and junior college. So now it gives an idea of guys and women that's not qualified in the classroom or whatever. You might get locked up. This is a second opportunity, but you got a coach who cares. Like, I really loved his coaching. Like, he didn't curse not one time. And my college coach, Division 1, didn't curse at me, and he got the best out of them guys. Even when they was going against what he was saying, sometimes they understand that he cared. And for me, most men and women need to see that, especially in these inner cities, because you don't have the resource. Both me and Crystal said we didn't take the SAT. She didn't take the SAT. I took the SAT the last month before graduation. By that time, it's no studying for no SAT in a month. That's just not realistic. That's not a realistic expectation. So what I got from it, it was basically the real, raw, and authentic. And it was showing true to what junior college is about. And like I said, second chance and seeking approval from everybody, including yourself, as well as your family and everybody else, and the expectation that you had to live up to. But that's my overall perspective about it. But I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it.
Word. I think
Yeah, I
you.
thought. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
Oh,
you. Go ahead, Crystal.
yeah, I like Nafis said. I think it was eerily accurate. And I think what's eerily accurate for me is that it's 2021 and it's accurate. This was for me in 2001. That is the same. You're talking about 20 years later. It's the same thing. Nothing's changed. Like, you still have these programs where, and I think the difference that's pointed out that is very important to note is that the coach was more than a coach. You don't get that at every JUCO, because it's, at the end of the day, what I learned is it's a business. This is a business. Basketball, sports is a business, and you are an asset until you become a liability. And when you become a liability, we remove liability. You know what I'm saying? So I think it showed like the grit and the heart that it takes to be a coach when you care. Not just like, because I think for him, this was bigger than basketball. He was teaching life lessons and transferable skills. Like, this was big. Like, it showed you what players go through. It shows you the trauma. It even showed you how they cope. I think Joe Hampton was an example of how some people cope. His problem with why he gained all that weight and started doing drugs was the coping. It's the coping that comes with being up here. He was at Oak Hill. That's one of the top, you go to Oak Hill, that's like going to DeMatha or Montverde or IMG or something, right? And you up there, and those dreams don't come to fruition because you got all these barriers and things that's occurring. Nobody's teaching you how to cope. So what do? You numb yourself. You start misbehaving. You just start doing things. And then, like Nafis said, then you got the people in your ear like, man, you were supposed to do this. And they comparing you to people that you know you better than. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, it showed what happens in locker rooms when them cameras ain't rolling. Oh, I know I done kicked a couple chairs, threw a couple ice things when nobody was looking. My coach let me do that. Like, didn't stop me in the moment because he understood energy. And in that moment, you don't stop nobody in that moment. You let them calm down and sit with them thoughts, but that ain't the case. I'm glad it's called, last chance, because at some places, you ain't even getting that last chance. You go to a JUCO, you kick something over, they get him out of here. He's trouble. She's angry. They start throwing them terms out there. And I think that's the case for Cameron, because, Cameron went to a JUCO too. So a lot of players I know went to JUCOs and end up getting arrested and banned from the school because they didn't have a coach like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think you both highlight some great points, Nafis. I think you highlighted it as well as Crystal, right? This systemic racism issues when it comes to things like standardized testing, not being aware or familiar about what's needed in order to take your talents to the next level. You're thinking, listen, I'm doing my part. I'm playing basketball. This is what I'm supposed to do. I'm getting whatever grades I'm getting in class. And then another additional component, which we know is historically racist and biased, this standardized testing comes into play, and they say, hey, you have to take this in order to be able to be eligible for college athletics. The same thing happened to me. I didn't play college athletics, but even though I knew about the SAT, I didn't take it until a few months before my senior year ended, right? And I went to college. It was either, I believe, Bethune-Cookman or Bloomsburg University where I went, and I went there for my friends, even though I had information, like my mom was a college graduate. But again, is this information being funneled to our student athletes, especially student athletes within the urban communities? Right. And also, parallels. We talk about the trauma that you both experienced of having a sibling murder. Right. And I heard about Nafis's first time hearing about Crystal's brother. I sit and think about my own brother who died when he was 24 from opioid use, using codeine, and his heart stopped. Right. And so we think about these traumas. Right. And unfortunately, this trauma unites us. Right. And our resilience unites us, because even still, in the midst of experience, what it is that we've experienced, we had some missteps along the way, no doubt. Right. And thankfully, our missteps didn't lead us into places where we didn't necessarily need to be. Right. And was able to still succeed. And I think we saw that with the I'm about to say characters, but some of them you could tell was doing a little bit much for the cameras, right? Because that's what you want to do if you 19, if you hamming for the cameras. But I think we saw that with Joe Hampton. It opens up with him having this fit of rage, this fit of aggression, right? He needed that moment in order. That's how he knew how to cope. Like you said, Nafis, like you said, Crystal. That's how he's so used to coping. Clearly he hasn't had anybody truly to work with him to learn how to cope in a different way. Because even at the JUCO level, and that was one of the things that I noticed, because in the course of the season, it wasn't necessarily improving. Right, we saw it gets towards the end. Like we see him blow up in front of the coaches from Weber State and Loyola Marymount. I'm like, yo, you drawing, dog? Like, yo, just stop talking. Just be able to take a minute. That's all they telling you to do. He coming at your neck because he know you one of the strongest people on the team. He trying to give them potentially an opportunity to see how you lead. And I don't think he grasped that concept. It took the good brother, and his name escapes me, the coach who's wheelchair bound. He knew exactly how to deal with him, and it's important to have people like that in your life who's not going to just say, "Well, to hell with you, go ahead and leave. We getting rid of you out the program." He went in there, said, "Listen, dog, we believe in you." His demeanor didn't change, his tone didn't change. Like, listen, man, you know I f with you. You know what I mean? He kept saying like, "Yo, you know I f with you." He's like, "Come on, man. You know what I mean? Come on, because Joe Hampton he already had his clothes on, ready to roll. What'd he do? Put his stuff back on and wheeled the coach back out there, right? And I thought that was so big, but unfortunately, so many of our black and brown kids and college athletes, once they have those moments, again, it's a wrap. So I guess my next question would be: Did any one character, and I keep saying character, but we're gonna go with it for all intents and purposes. What because they end up being characters, even though they're real people, right? Did any one character like resonate with you, like their story, their journey, their grind to get to where it is that they desired?
I think it was Deshaun for me. I mean, all of them had a piece of me, like from the jump. Like I'm like, man, the empathy kicks in overdrive for me. But Deshaun, I think with him losing his mom and his father, I think people don't understand the impact of loss, and that whole grieving process looks different for everybody else. And I think just watching how he was able to just kind of corral the troops, even through all of his own stuff that he had going on, he still attempted to be a leader, without having anyone teaching him how to be a leader. It wasn't until he got to that school that anybody was teaching him how to lead a team, and dealing with loss. And I think in the one where the coach was talking about how he had the final conversation with his mom, and it was like, I'm leaving you my child. Like, it's like, how does someone that young navigate life, basketball, knowing your mom is dying and your dad died? Like, to me, his grind was just, different. And connecting the first and the last episode. In the first episode, the coach was like, I want these guys to experience what I had. And, the coach is married, he got kids. So for me, it was a good thing to end it with Deshaun finding that partner piece as well. So, now he has that emotional support in the form of the interpersonal relationship with the young lady, So for me, it was definitely his story.
Word. What about you, Nafis?
I would say Deshaun. I think that was me to the T. I think that was pretty much me, because it was like almost I didn't get my just due from high school. I felt like I left something there, and it was mainly on me. And the striving to get to the Division I level, it used to kill me. Like, every day I'm in junior college, I'm like, I cannot wait to get out of junior college. Like, I need to hurry up and get out of here. But not knowing that, when you said earlier about student athlete, I challenged that to say athlete student, because if you've seen throughout the course of that whole Last Chance U, you see a lot of rage at each individual. I noticed something in basketball, it brings something out of you from the emotional side of everything. So when we talk about athletes in general, people don't understand what comes with being an athlete. They think it's just a sport. You put your blood, sweat, and tears into this game where you're not only fighting for yourself, but you fighting to live up to the expectations, like I said from earlier, from everybody around you, let alone that school is banking on you to win basketball games with a small budget. Like I said, we didn't have, my Pell Grant went straight to my rent that wasn't associated with I didn't live in a dorm. I never lived in a dorm in 4 years. So I don't even know what the dorm life was. We was literally getting picked. My teammate lived, it was 3 of us in an apartment, and we was just driving to school. Whenever we had class, we just stayed there the whole day until the last person was done or find a ride with somebody. So just in that, Deshaun was really resonated with me of being a leader. Even when he had his moments, the coach trusted him to get on him and still lead the way. And like for me, like he is a resilient and going through all those trials and tribulations and still be balanced enough to get to where he was trying to go. Like I think Deshaun was the closest, and like I said, I had a Joe Hampton on my team, so
Yeah, even though I didn't play, I was more like Joe Hampton on the court. You know what I mean? And it's actually one of the reasons why I stopped playing basketball. Right? Like, yeah, I played intramurals. I played in different leagues here. I'm seeing some of the names you put, and I'm like, yeah, I remember Hot Rod. You know what I mean? Playing with him every day up the Y. You know what I mean? Because those runs was, you know what I mean, it was a privilege to just be out there with some of these folk who really do it, right? But I think about people like Malik, right? And somebody said to him, I don't know if it was his mother, but they brought up the idea that does he want it? Right? Does he want it, or he doesn't want to be the 6'9" person working in the grocery store or what have you, just based off his demeanor, right? I didn't know if, and you can let me know your thoughts. I didn't know if it was like basketball was something that he loved, or if it was an outlet, right? And we know that some people do certain things because it's an outlet, and at some point, right, you realize like if you don't love it, you're not going to be able to engage in it for but so long. And so I think for him it was interesting just because I was watching that dynamic between his father and him. I'm like, dog, how you just gonna come back around and try to be yelling at him and telling him what to do? I'm like, I don't even know if he responds that way, right? To that type of motivation, like you said, Nafis, how somebody responds. What type of coach do you have? So, for me, it was like that Malik mentality where people think that you're soft, right? Because you can see Joe Hampton like, yo, dog, I should be out there. Like he saw, like, yeah, he athletic and all of that, but he don't got that dog in him, right? He doesn't have that dog to get there. Now, granted, he went on. He's now at Central Michigan or what have you. But for me, that was something that I took away from his story. And so, let me know if you saw the same thing, especially that father-son piece from him not being there. Like, that really grinded my gears. I didn't get upset about much, you know what I mean, for much happening, but I'm just like, I don't think you around to be a meal ticket, for him to be a meal ticket, but that's how it seems. And I'm thinking like, Malik probably has these moments where he's like, damn, am I just a meal ticket for these people? Right? Or are they really here for me? So I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
I think that in his case, I don't think basketball is the passion. I think it's the expectation because of the size and the decent skill set, but I don't see it as the passion. But I also see it as being one of them things where it's like you don't want to let the people around you down. And like Nafis alluded to earlier, is that when you are an athlete student, as he said, that pressure is really heavy. It is heavy. And when people are constantly telling you what they think you should do based upon your size, skill set, or because it's just something that's in your family, it's easy to fall into it, especially if nobody is feeding another part of you. So we don't really get to see what else he can do. Like, he might be a good artist. He might be good at technology. We don't know these things because it's never explored. And that story, that thing, that's not, unique to him, but because we're talking about him and what we see, I truly feel like if we had a story where it just explored his life, I wouldn't be surprised if he had a completely different skill set that was way better than basketball. But because, either you're slinging crack rock or you got a wicked jump shot. That's that mindset that we carry, that we don't get to see that. But like you said, it's obvious. And especially when the father comes into the picture, that kind of grinded my gears too, because it's like, you talking like you some professional basketball player and the NCAA clearinghouse rules and all this, like you talking like you know the game like that, like where you come from. So yeah, that part got me as well.
Or if he do know the game, right, and if he was making sense, it's like, Oh, you did all this studying? Why? Right? We get skeptical about motives, and it's unfortunate. But these are, like Nafis said, because I firmly believe that as athlete, student, right? It's you're the commodity, right? You're the commodity. Your skill set is the commodity, and whatever you do in the classroom, you just do. But your skill set is the reason why that you're here. But again, that just speaks to something that I'm sure so many athletes, student athletes experience. It's like, why are you around? And hopefully you do ask yourself this question: why are you around? And you don't just Allen Iverson it, right? And just say, "Yo, I'm taking the whole block with me," and we all, going to be up here in Fridays or in hula hands. So yeah, no, I think you bring up a good point. It was something else that I wanted to speak to that you said and asked you about, but it escapes me at the moment. So while I think about that, I'll get your thoughts, Nafis.
Yeah, Malik's story, like it's for me. Even if I always say now, as being older, of looking how basketball and just in sports in general, everybody says they like, oh, it's a free scholarship, it's a free opportunity to use basketball to get to where you're going. But at 19 years old, you really don't know who you are. And I think in Malik's case, even for the father, of course, if you see a 6'9", 6'10" guy, you want to push him, even if he wasn't there, just the knowing that it's a possibility. But in the reality of the sense of basketball, nobody ever speaks about education. The question only arises when you got a 6'9", one and done or something like that. But in this case, a junior college guy, nobody ever talk about education. So when people say it's free or you got an opportunity to educate yourself, as we see all this trauma and all these people, even at junior college, you hear this, you hear that, the father coming around, I need you to go to Division 1. When does a kid really get to breathe and exhale about who they are and understand they have different talents? Because we're constantly pounding in, you got to be the best basketball player. It's like people want the best basketball player, but then you say you got to look at something else because the percentages are very, very low. So it confuses me when kids are doing the opposite and they say they don't love it. No, a lot of people don't love their job. They might be super talented at what they do, and that's fine too. Everybody's not going to the NBA. It's 1%. 4,400 guys that ever went to the NBA. So when I do see Malik, he probably does have other interests, but he might be just as good on the basketball court, but he just doesn't care to the point where I'm trying to kill myself of trying to make the NBA. Once again, we don't get a chance. We're not allowed as humans first, let alone with that title of being a basketball player, to even inhale and exhale about our livelihood, because it's always being controlled either by the schedule, trying to be controlled by other people, or just controlled by our own self when we don't even have the handle on our own self. Like you said earlier, nobody has never talked to a therapist. None of them was talking to a therapist. None
At
of them was
all.
talking to a psychologist.
At all.
They didn't even have that. That wasn't even talked about. And this, like you said, it's 2020, 2021. And mental health been out there.
And it was what Coach Mosley, go to Jesus, right? It was
Right.
Jesus who's going to help you through it, and there's no shade to that. But I'm sitting there
Right.
thinking, like, man, I would love to see one of these kids, especially Joe, especially Deshaun, given how significant the trauma they experienced, talk to a therapist, have somebody that they can talk to. Listen, I've been compelled to, like the whole time I was watching the last 2 episodes, I was like, yo, I'm about to go on the old pick of Joe, be like, yo, bro, just hit me up, you know what I mean? Like, if you could ever have a question about anything, just for that conversation piece, right? Because we forget that, and as you said, we forget that these athletes, student athletes, are experiencing so many other things outside of basketball. When you were talking, Crystal, and now I remember, it reminds me of Larry Sanders and his video that when I first started doing public speaking on mental health, I would always play his video from I believe it's the Players Tribune, and he opens it up by saying, "Hi, I'm Larry Sanders. I'm a father. I'm a painter. I'm an artist, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes I play basketball." And it was so profound because we all get known for the thing that we do well. We get known for what we post on social media, and it's important to remind not only others but to remind ourselves that we're so much more than that. And so when you speak of Malik and possibly having other interests, I think about I believe it was Anthony Edwards, who was the number 1 pick by the Timberwolves. I think he said he don't even watch basketball. You know what I mean? Like he just a freak athlete who's good at it, but he doesn't watch basketball. It's not like something he's like Kobe about, right? Where I'm waking up at 1 a.m., I'm going out there. I just happen to be really, really good at something. And so I think we owe it to ourselves to explore those other areas. It's not wrong to be known as the basketball player, as Crystal Woodley, the basketball player, Nafis Bricks, the basketball player, but also the mental health advocates, also the parents of young children, also the friend and what have you. So I think that's so critical. That's,
Yeah, I don't know if like I tell people a lot of times, like if you're new to my Instagram and you see like the basketball stuff, I'm like, if you go back a couple weeks ago, that's new. I wasn't posting basketball stuff at all. Like I did not have not one basketball like I might occasionally post a throwback clip from overseas or something like that, but I stayed away from, posting that type of stuff. One, because I recognize that that's still a trigger for me because I feel like I didn't fulfill what I was supposed to in the sport due to injuries, traumas, and not having that access to, specific people or resources, so that was still very much a trigger for me. And I was like, man, I made it up in my head a long time ago that I don't want nothing to do with basketball because it's a disappointment to me, and I never wanted to talk about it. But for me, it was always like, yeah, y'all know me as this ball handling basketball player. But man, what about this? What about that? Like a lot of people don't know. I originally went to school to be a funeral home director. That is what I wanted to be. I still got the newspaper article from when I was in high school, and they interviewed me and they said, "Which you want to be?" I said, "I want to be a mortician." Like, but when I got to college, those things you couldn't do. You couldn't do that. I wanted to study kinesiology. You couldn't do that. Why? Because the workload was too heavy for your basketball schedule. So, take this, do physical education. Why? Because the gym coach is cool with the basketball coach, and your schedule is light. And so, Nafis, you mentioned, they talk about it's a free education, but it's not your education. Because a lot of people athletes go to school, and they get something like a physical education degree. Nothing wrong with physical education if you want to do that. But if you're forcing people to do it because they're athletes, what am I going to do with that when all this is over? And it's not what I want to do. Now I'm stuck doing this because I have a degree in it, or you got to start over. So it's a real reality, for myself, and I know for plenty others who I don't watch basketball. I just recently started getting back into it. Wow. Like when people ask me to coach, I'd be like, I absolutely do not want to coach. I don't want to. They thought you so good. Me and basketball don't have the best relationship not because of what I went through, but because I recognize that children at a very young age hang on to that so tightly. And for me, I want to teach you how to train basketball players. I don't care about you playing it, because at least if you hurt yourself or you don't make it, you can still be around the sport and make a living. There's still a specific thing that you can do that won't leave you high and dry. Like we see a lot of athletes who are good. There's some really good athletes out there who, once they didn't make it to where they were supposed to, they back home and don't have no other skill sets or don't know how to cope with that loss. And it is a loss. I call it the grieving process of a sport. You spend your whole life doing something and it's taken away from you, you grieve that loss. And if you don't know how to grieve it, it becomes like this chip on your shoulder, and and it's just a whole thing in itself. Wow. That requires therapy.
Yeah, and I think I ain't gonna therapize you. You know what I mean? I ain't gonna do that right now, right? That's not what we're here for. But you opened the door just a little bit, and so how are you? If you are right, and again, you feel free to let me know. You can say I don't feel like answering that or whatever. But how are you? Are you working on that, or are you working through that? Do you envision yourself?
Yeah, that's always.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any particular?
That's something I talk about with my therapist.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something I definitely talk about with my therapist. Like my whole fear of, like, even with my daughter. Like my daughter is like this freak athlete 4-year-old, and I'm like, why are you doing this? Like, it's almost like forcing me to be around sports, and I'm just like, I don't want to put my trauma on you, and not say I don't want to support something, but like trying to find that healthy balance of like, if you want to do sports, let's do sports, right? But recognize that that ain't the only thing, you know. And I think one of the things that like really brought this to life for me was recently, Dame. Did you see the thing with I can't even think of the kid's name. He was like, I ain't going to prom. What the prom gonna do for me? I'm going to the gym. And Dame was like, man, go to the prom. It's that mentality right there. Like, you willing to give up everything. Something so simple like a prom, something that you don't think in the moment that you're going to look back on. Like, because I look back on it all the time. Like, my friend circle is very small, and it only consists of people that I played basketball with, because the sport isolates you. Wow. And when you put yourself into it like that, you don't have that social life. You kind of become like almost like this introvert in a sense, because you only can relate to basketball players. So your box is here and the world is out here, but you're so used to being in here, you don't even know how to function out here.
Word. That's heavy. That's heavy. You got me thinking about many things, right? First, number one, just the curriculum or and what's taking place in the high school and college setting. Because in high school too, some high schools you get to be able to pick the classes that you want to take, or are they being picked for you? And so I wonder how many athletes in college are graduating with degrees in exercise science when they would rather have one in business or psychology or something else that requires, not to say that, because I have a master's in exercise science and that was hard, right? I ain't going, because I ain't no science person, I ain't no numbers person, but to try and do that while still playing, right? It's just wow. What are your thoughts, Nafis?
Man, Crystal hit it all on the nose.
Yeah.
I was in that same situation where I resented basketball for a long time. So as I started, when I was done playing overseas, I stopped on my own. So I was just exhausted from waiting on agents. I went through 6 agents through 3 years. I had a brand new baby, and I was just like, I can't depend on another man to give me an opportunity or a job. And I wanted to run as far away from basketball as I could. I wanted to play rec ball. Like, I wanted to enjoy it. Like, no strings attached, no money involved, and just enjoy the game. But as I got older, I started to realize that I wasn't the only one. Even during my journey through playing basketball, like last year as you, I was talking to my friends that was going through the same thing. It wasn't mental health at the time. We just having conversation.
Yeah.
There's a couple guys that I was talking to who's like, what you going through? They either come off the bench, and it's like a shock to them. It's like, I'm going through the same, I'm not going through the same thing, but I'm in junior college. I'm still below the meter in my mind. I'm still like, I didn't make it to Division I, so I'm still not there. So we really using each other as sounding boards about our lives and where this thing might take us, and still worry about coming back to Philadelphia and not get caught up, really ascend in the sport. And to the point where now it's going to happen. I'm an aspired psychologist, for not just for athletes, but for the community, and really speaking to that space, because I didn't have that there. I was going crazy in college. Like, I had a major breakdown in college. Like, couldn't pull it together, didn't know how to articulate. My family and friends was telling me like, is it the girls? Is it what is it? And it's like, to the point I was throwing up every day. When we lose a game, I would throw up, literally make myself throw up and sit in the dark and think about my life and how it spiraled, and like, do I really want this? Do you really love me for who I am, or you love me for what I can do? To the point where whatever I did, I feel like I wasn't good enough, whether it was in the classroom, because like I said, it was me. I was only the Black student in the classroom. So my junior college had 20,000 kids that was either commuting, because we didn't have dorms. So it's one of the biggest junior colleges in the country. You got to think, they talking about topics that might be racist. I'm sitting in there dumbfounded, but I can't express myself because the teacher's white, the students are white. And if I give my opinion from a Black experience, are they going to report me to the dean or something, or tell my coach, or I'm going to be running? And all that stuff played in my mind as I started to develop and not really understanding, like you said about the education part. Education was just there to say, well, that's just the baseline. Well, we get a 3.5 as a team, but what did you get a 3.5 in? Did you take gym class? Did you take art class? Did you take whatever writing class? Like, was it the basic, or were you trying to really help us be exposed to other opportunities along with basketball? And I felt like basketball didn't give me that opportunity. Basketball was really like Crystal said, I was in a box because that's all I thought about. And I was realistic about my expectations of making the NBA. I knew it was a possibility that I wasn't gonna make it. So I was prepared. Like, I always I wanted my own mentoring program. And now as I got older, I'm like, all this stuff played a part in my development where I was realistic, but I still regretted certain things about basketball where people tell me now today, don't run from basketball, embrace it and make it cool and expose yourself to other things, because that kid that was just like you that didn't take the SAT and still looking for opportunity, like in this pandemic right now, that probably don't care about the SAT or didn't do nothing this whole year looking for opportunity, you got to be able to tell your story and help them be exposed to things that you weren't, so they won't have to go through the same thing, and make it be okay to be vulnerable about your situation. So all that stuff hit home for me.
Word. I guess as we get ready to wrap up, would you change anything? Would you change anything in your story, in your journey?
That's such a hard
It is. My
question.
bad. But that's what I'm here
A
for. I
hard
got
question. I don't think, because when I say would I change anything, because then I have to think about, if you change one thing, you change the entire trajectory, and then now that means I have to take back my daughter and all this other stuff like that, and these wonderful youth that I've had the opportunity to work with over the years. So I don't think that I would change anything, because I learned early that your journey is not just yours. Your journey belongs to other people too, because what you do impacts other people. Like, you make one different decision and you may not have crossed paths with that kid and this and that. And it's almost like, what is it? It's not The Matrix. I can't even think of the other movie, that if you make one decision, it kind of just changes everything. So I don't think, for me, just looking back, I think I'm at because I've spent so much time around athletes, that made it, that didn't make it because, they didn't have people like me in their life. I would never, because I feel like I've impacted too many people in a positive way along the way. And then I also think of it as, for me, even with all that I went through, I still made it to levels that people who didn't go through didn't make it to. I still had the opportunity to go overseas for, I spent 6 years traveling. So I don't regret that piece. And, not everybody gets to strength train be a strength coach, working with athletes at Howard. There's things that I've done along the way, and I'm just like, man, I cannot even believe I made it this far. So.
Word. Appreciate you. What about you, Nafis?
No, I wouldn't change nothing. I think we wouldn't have this conversation if I changed anything. I wouldn't be to this point of having an identity of knowing my athletic identity and who I was as a person. So I think it's very, very important to keep the journey like it was. And I built so many relationships through my trials and tribulations, and have my own story to articulate now, and as a man, to give back in a way where it's not always financial, but really give a perspective where I'm not in your race. I'm here to support what's going on and give you the real facts about what it looks like. And I think that in itself, as far as mentoring, as far as giving knowledge about situations, that's what we need: professional development. You need to know what it looks like. You need somebody who been through your path that you're trying to get through and open up those doors for you, because nobody can say on this call that you did it by yourself. You looked at something, you went through something, and you learn from your mistakes. And everybody mature at different times. So I think for me, this is all part of my maturity and my growth. And then it's a blessing to get this far. Like Crystal was saying, like, I travel across the world. I had opportunity get a master's that I earned, or whatnot. And another thing, like, I want people to realize that a scholarship is not free; it's a tax write-off. I really want to stress that to people, like, that's on this, that's watching, that will watch this. You earn that. They have to give it. Schools are non-profit. Make sure that people know that, like, you earn that. So don't let any of these coaches tell you, well, we're giving you a free ride. It ain't free if you're controlling my destiny. And I think when me and Crystal did, we looked outside of the box with our trials and tribulation and expanded on it. So now when we have conversations about our lives, it's real, raw, and authentic, and we're not trying to put on for somebody. We telling you real deal Holyfield. So like I said, I appreciate this, and I wouldn't change my journey at all, even with the violence and the murder. I said now I'm more awake about my surroundings, and I'm here to educate but learn as well. So I wouldn't change nothing.
Word. And I guess for me, I would change. I wouldn't have played on an all-white intramural team called Zack Attack. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have did it because that didn't end well. That didn't end well at all. Listen, I appreciate y'all for coming through, man. It means a lot. I know it's short notice, but I thank you for coming through. You definitely dropped some gems. How can the people follow you, be in contact with you?
So I'm on Instagram at cwoodley3. I'm on YouTube as well, cwoodley3. My name on Facebook is actually spelled backwards, so it's Latserk Woodley, not Crystal Woodley. And that's funny because all these young kids, they when you talking to them, they want to follow you on Facebook. So I had to switch my name up, and that's why it's backwards up there. But I'm very active on social media, so.
Word.
You can follow me on Instagram, NafisRicks too, and just my name, NafisRicks, on Facebook. Yeah, that's the easiest way to follow me. I'm active as well on social media.
Word. Well, listen, man, I appreciate y'all coming through again. Much love and light to y'all and y'all journey. You definitely added value to not only this conversation, but to my life and my perspective when it comes to especially black athletes. And so I thank you for that. And so for everybody who is tuning in, I may or may not be back next Monday. Y'all know how I do. If I'm feeling good, y'all gonna hear from me. I do got some stuff to talk about though. So yeah, I'll be back next Monday. But catch me same time, same place. Until next time, peace.